Good evening, and welcome to this week's edition of The Message. I am your host, Donatus King. We'll spend this next hour with one purpose in mind, and that one purpose is delivering the message that God is Almighty. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be is a piece of God. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be was made by God. Everything that ever happened is happening right now or ever will happen was made to happen by God. God is the master plan for all time and all creation. God is Almighty. The message is brought to you by, is produced by the Society of Knowledge Incorporated. The Society is an interdenominational ministry. Our members come from various different religious and spiritual backgrounds. We have various different religious and spiritual beliefs. Although we come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs, there's one belief that we share. There's one piece of knowledge that we hold in common. And that's the knowledge that there is a being. By no matter what name we may have been taught to call that being, by no matter what name we may have come to know that being, whether that name be God, Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Jehovah, Buddha, nature, by no matter what name, we know that there is a being that possesses not some of the power, not most of the power, but all of the power. That's the reason we do this show, and the only reason we do this show, and that's to deliver the message that that being, that personally I call God, that being is indeed Almighty. Today is January the 14th, January the 14th, 2021. I remind you of that fact because tonight, as we are on most Thursdays, we are live. If there's something that God has done for you in your life, a miracle that God has worked in your life, share that testimony. Let folks know that in the year 2021, that's right, January 14th, 2021, that God is still working miracles. You know, sometimes we might try to do things, whether it's try to get a job, whether it's try to kick a drug habit, kick an alcohol habit, try to fix some problems that are in our relationships, whether it's a husband and wife relationship, relationship at work. We might try everything that we can and nothing works, no matter how hard we try. We might try to get counselors. We might try to go to doctors. We might try all different kinds of things and nothing seems to solve the problem. We might go to our pastors, our imam, our rabbi. Nothing seems to fix the problem. Well, I'm telling you, don't give up hope. Don't give up hope because God can work a miracle. When everything else fails, God can work a miracle and solve any problem that you might have, a financial problem. God can work that problem out. Understand what I'm saying? I know from experience that God can work a miracle in your life. God has worked many miracles in my life. There have been times when things have been going on and I've tried everything that I could to overcome, couldn't get it done, and somehow or another God worked the miracle in my life, solved my problem. God can do the same thing for you. So join the discussion. Join us on Facebook. Join us on Zoom. Good evening to my lovely wife, Georgia. Thank you for joining us on Facebook. As I'm saying, join the discussion. Okay, brother Israel, thank you for joining us. I welcome you on Zoom. Brother Israel, we're going to have a few announcements that we're going to go over, and then after the announcements, we're going to open up our discussion. Okay, so all of you that are watching, hit that like button, hit that share button, and let your friends know so they can join the discussion. All right, so today is January the 14th. Okay, so we know that. We'll have our announcements, then our testimonies. Then we'll have our religious spiritual study. And as we're reminded in the book of Thessalonians, prove all things, hold fast that which is good. Coming out of the book of Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. Our discussion topic tonight is the Book of the Dead, also known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. The Book of Coming Forth. Those announcements, that's our main website that you see on the screen now. That's www.godisalmighty.org. I invite you to log that into your web browser 24 hours a day a week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can visit that website, and there are links to all of our discussion blogs and platforms. Tonight, the message is coming out of New Orleans, Louisiana, but on the first and third Sundays, it comes out of Lafayette, Louisiana. It's delivered by Messenger Ryan King and Messenger Corey Levier. And that Facebook page is Facebook Live at the Messenger. Brother Dwayne, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Tonight we're discussing the Book of the Dead, also known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you may not be familiar with it. But I'm going to, the text that I'm going to read out, this text is coming from Wikipedia, but I've done some research, and pretty much all the research bears out and confirms what they have there in Wikipedia. And I actually have a copy of this, and let me see if I can put it so that you, all right. I have a copy of this book, and it's called The Book of the Dead. And this is just one translation of it, and this is the translation by E.A. Wallace Budge. E.A. Wallace Budge. That's a very popular translation of the Book of the Dead. But I invite you to do your own research on it. So I have a few slides, but before I go through the slides, I'm going to let's see if we have. All right, if Brother Israel.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, Brother Israel, we're going to go. I have a few slides.
Can you see me?
I can hear you.
But you can't see.
Right.
Start video. All right.
Right.
All right, my bad. I'm supposed to hit start video.
All right, we got you, brother. How you doing this evening?
Greetings and peace. I'm doing okay, Hotel.
All right. All right. I see it's interesting, man. The shirt that you have on look like some hieroglyphs on it.
Yeah, this actually come out of the Book of Coming Forth by Day.
All right. All right. Well, I tell you, before we go through this, we're going to go through the slides. It's only going to take 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and jump into the conversation. But before we do that, you have some opening comments, some opening remarks for our viewers?
Yeah, I would just like people to understand. Greetings to everybody, all the viewers, peace, and thank y'all for participating and watching. I would just want people to understand that first, once you hear the information that I will be presenting about the Book of Coming Forth by Day, one thing I want to share with people is you can't look at this information, especially this particular literature, from a Christian perspective or Muslim perspective. You can't look at it from a Judeo-Christian perspective because you won't get it. And I'll leave it there.
All right. All right. Very, very, very interesting comments, man. I'm looking forward to continue the discussion with you. And just one observation, man. That's a great background that you have. A great background that you have, brother.
I had to upgrade to catch up with you. You know, y'all was laid out there. I had to get an iPhone. I had to upgrade and catch up with y'all, man.
All right, you did very well. Did very well. All right, let's see if we can get into just these slides. And all right, as you heard Brother Israel speaking and using that title, and that's the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And as you see here, the Book of the Dead, also known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And that Book of Coming Forth by Day is actually a more accurate translation of the Egyptian writings of the title of the book. But let's just get into these slides. The Book of the Dead is an ancient Egyptian funerary text generally written on papyrus and used from the beginning of the New Kingdom. And as you see, that vignette, as they call it, from the Book of the Dead, and this is something that was written on papyrus, okay? So this is one of the forerunners of paper, a papyrus that would be rolled up into scrolls, but that's when they talk about the Book of the Dead. So it wasn't a book like we have nowadays. It was written on papyrus. And as some scholars have it, written from the beginning of the New Kingdom, and that's about 1,500 years before the Christian era, to around 50 years before the Christian era. Okay? The original Egyptian name for the text is translated as Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Book of Emerging Forth into the Light. And what you see on the screen now, that's actually just a picture of a piece of the papyrus. And it's a very delicate because it's thousands of years old, but it's like a paper and it's rolled up, as you can see. Now, we're going to get into a little bit about the origin of that in just a minute, but book is the closest term to describe the loose collection of texts consisting of a number of magic spells intended to assist a dead person's journey through the duat, or underworld, and into the afterlife, and written by many priests over a period of about 1,000 years. And as you see on the screen right now, that's a depiction of the duat, or the underworld. And all of those different symbols have a meaning. We'll get into that discussion a little bit later on, but just briefly right now, as you see, this feature right here, this cross in the middle, and as you see on one side, it's kind of hard to tell, but on the left side of the picture, as you're looking at it, on the left side of the scale, and that's a scale, on the left scale, that's a feather. And that feather is a feather of Ma'at, M-A-A-T, Ma'at. And on the right side of the scale, this is a heart. So we'll get into a little bit more, but essentially what it was is when a person died, they descended into the duat, into the underworld, and their heart was placed on a scale. And if their heart was lighter than Ma'at's feather, then they were allowed to proceed and finally get into a sea of reeds. Some folks might call it heaven, but if it wasn't, then these little things that you see down here, they would eat up the heart, and that meant that the person couldn't live forever. Even his spirit would be gone. So that's some of what the book of Coming Forth by Day is about. Sister Claudia, thank you for joining us. Please hit that like button, hit that share button. Let's start a watch party. Share this information with your friends. The Book of the Dead, which was placed in the coffin or burial chamber of the deceased, was part of a tradition of funerary texts, which includes the earlier pyramid text and coffin text, which were painted on two objects, not written on papyrus. Some of the spells included in the book were drawn from these older works and date to the 3rd millennium BCE. Right? So that's 3,000 years before the Christian era. And just to kind of put this in a few different words, when we talk about the Book of the Dead, that's written on like something like paper. Okay? But even before you had that paper, all these hieroglyphs and these vignettes, these little scenes, they were carved in stone in the pyramids, or they were painted on the coffins of the pharaohs and folks that died. And then later on, after paper was invented, the papyrus was invented, then they started writing it on the papyrus. So we're talking about stuff that goes back over 3,000 years. And so this is what you see on the screen right now. That's part of the pyramid text, stuff that was etched and written on the pyramids. And here, coffin text, you see the same right where you see the pointer going. You see the different vignettes. And vignettes just means little scenes and hieroglyphs on here. And that's very striking, interesting, that Brother Israel came on tonight, and he had his virtual background, just like one of the coffins, with the different vignettes and hieroglyphs are written on. And right here, where you see the cursor going out, that's known as the Eye of Horus. Very, very, very prominent, very important object when you start talking about Egyptology. All right. The surviving papyri contain a varied selection of religious and magical texts and vary considerably in their illustration. I skipped one word, one sentence. And this is, there was no single, okay? There was no single or canonical book of the dead. So just like nowadays, we talk about the Christian Bible and the canon Bible, the canonized Bible, meaning the official Bible. Even with the Bible, there are still books that used to be in the Bible. There are books that are in some folks' edition of the Bible that are not in other folks' edition of the Bible. As we know that the Catholic Bible has different books in it than the Protestant Bible. So the same thing with the Book of the Dead. It was not one book that was written at one time. It were many, many different scrolls, many different spells that were written, whether they're written on the pyramids, whether they're written on the coffins, but they were written. And just in modern days, certain of them came to be placed in one form, in one collection, and given that name of the Book of the Dead. But there are many, 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 many different, and they call them spells. And we're going to get into that. We open up the discussion with Brother Israel. But let me just read through this another minute. The surviving papyri contain a varied selection of religious and magical texts and vary considerably in their illustration. Some people seem to have commissioned their own copies of the Book of the Dead, perhaps choosing the spells they thought most vital in their own progression to the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was most commonly written in hieroglyphic or hieratic script on a papyrus scroll and often illustrated with vignettes depicting the deceased in their journey into the afterlife. And I'm very thankful and grateful for a comment that Brother Israel made as far as when you study the Book of the Dead, and a lot of what I'm reading tonight, coming off of Wikipedia, scholars, most scholars, and a lot of scholars tend to analyze and make comments about the Book of the Dead from a Judeo-Christian mindset. And because of that, there's a certain amount of interpretation and a certain amount of coloring that goes into their reporting. So as I encourage you, to do your research, and even more important than doing your research, let the Spirit speak with you. Okay? Let the Spirit speak with you. Take some time to slow down and listen to the Spirit. The finest example of the Egyptian Book of the Dead in antiquity is the papyrus of Ani. Ani was an Egyptian scribe. It was discovered by Sir E.A. Wallace Budge in 1888 and was taken to the British Museum, where it currently resides. All right. I want to thank you, just those few screens, but I want to welcome, let's see if we can, all right. All right, Brother Israel.
Yeah.
We've gone through a few slides and a little bit of background info. So I know that you have some info that you can share with us as far as the book of coming forth by day.
All right. Yeah. First of all, I want to say the reason why it's known as the Book of the Dead is because during that period of 1837 to 1888, when they were doing a lot of tomb robbery and invasion, the British in Egypt, the youth, the native youth in Egypt were also going in there after the tomb raiders will go in there, and it was the kids, a lot of children who found the papyruses, which were on the bodies of various deceased individuals. So they was calling this the Dead Man Book because it was found on dead, people in Egypt. So that's where the term Book of the Dead comes from, because it was found on the bodies of people, men and women.
All right. All right.
All
And
right.
just a go ahead, brother.
No, you go.
No, all right. So just a little bit more on what Brother Israel was speaking about. Uh, and from what I read off of Wikipedia, the little bit of text that I read, I'm just going to take and add to that some, just to give a fuller picture that my understanding, my learning to this point is that there was a concept that a person that had lived their life, there was a concept of an afterlife, that when this heart stopped beating, that wasn't the end of the story, that there was indeed an afterlife. And we see that same concept that has been adopted by the
The world.
Judeo-Christian, by the world, okay, by the world, that there's an afterlife. Now, I kind of have a different understanding myself, and that understanding is that there is no afterlife, that life just transitions, that it continues. But again, that's another discussion. But
That afterlife was termed by Egyptologists. See, a lot of stuff that you hear if you didn't hear this from our scholars like Dr. Ben,
mhm,
one of the masters, Dr. John Henry Clark, and the other degree teachers and professors who came taught on ancient Kemet of the Nile Valley and period, you wouldn't really get this if you're looking at it strictly from a Eurocentric mind and you're getting it from Egyptologists,
mhm.
because they have a different um, agenda
Uh,
with the information that they understand.
all right, all right. Let me just put a little bit something in here, Brother Israel, and sometimes we tend not to listen to what Thessalonians says about prove all things, and we'll hear someone say something, we'll take that as gospel, particularly if it's someone, and I'll say this out, particularly if it's someone that's white, if it's someone that's male, if it's someone that's an elderly white male with a title in front or behind his name, we'll tend to take that when they say it. We'll tend to take that as gospel, that that's exactly the way it was, that's exactly what it was. Now, something that I've found out, that I've learned during my various studies, is that, yes, as Brother Israel was saying just now, that even something like religion, even something like history, we find that there is a bias, that there are people that will see an event occur, and because of their bias, whether it's a conscious bias or not, but because of their bias, they'll report it in a certain fashion and in a certain way. And a lot of, as Brother Israel was stating just now, a lot of what we read in our textbooks, no matter what the discipline is, no matter what the study is, whether it's history, whether it's biology, whether it's anthropology, there's some bias, and that bias reflecting the biases of the people that wrote the works. So yes, when we study about the book of Coming Forth by Day, when we do any study, uh, including religion, even more importantly, including religion, just be aware of that human element that's in there, and that human element of bias. I'm sorry, Brother Israel, go right ahead, brother.
Well, that's some good information. Um, the information was reading. I made 4 bullet points. Now they say it's for funerary text, and I explained what it was. Egyptologists consider them funerary texts for the simple fact that they were found on kings, queens, viziers, nobles, you know, regular people. It was found throughout the whole collection of the society. And that reason is because the very word that it means, coming forth by day, it was a different understanding from how we look at reality, how we have this, how most people have a fear of death. And, you know, people have been Christianized about the hell and the devil and all that stuff, right? Our ancestors didn't look at that. We didn't have that mentality. And I know it might be hard for people to understand, oh, people didn't think about devil and hell. No, we didn't have that, even though we had a negative force in our panthology, which was set, where the word Satan comes from. But that simply is the force of nature. That was not nothing evil. Force is not evil. Force is a part of nature. Now, ancestors understood that. Now, it was the funeral rotation that was coming forth by day because our ancestors looked at this reality of being in, how you spoke of, the duat. Our ancestors looked at reality with three states. They look at it as with the awakened state, which we're in now, or the conscious realm, people would say. They had the du'a state, or the dream realm, some people would say, and they had the unconscious state, or the deep sleep state, or Amentet, right? Now, our ancestors looked at this reality that we're in as the actual death. And when you die in this death, you wake up and come forth to the real light. So to a degree, our ancestors looked at this as a place, as a dream reality, to where we have a chance to experience what is the creator and the creatress, to experience what we call God and the goddess. This is the lowest level that we can experience that. So that was a concept throughout the whole society until Hellenization and, you know, the Greeks and the Romans came, and, you know, the Mongoloids and the whole world changed. Now, one other point I want to get into, they say it was a period of 3,000 years. We're in the year 2020. Now, from actual records that our people like Dr. Ben and Dr. John Henry Clark keep putting those two out there, God bless, it's actually over 8,000 years of history. As we count our 2,000 years, which we're in 2020 AD, say 3,000 to 4,000 to 5,000, well, it's actually over 6,000 years. Because, like I say, Egyptologists, society have an agenda, so they ain't gonna give us actual truths. So it's actually over 8,000 years of recorded history that our ancestors have. The third thing, the judgment scene that you were showing. The judgment scene is just that. It wasn't that we, like, people were walking around all pious and all righteous and stuff like that. It wasn't that. The judgment scene was that one of the sayings that I could pull, Egyptian Kemetic proverb, is that you must live to your heart's content. That's why the heart is on the scale, because you must live to your heart's content. Ma'at is balance, reciprocity, prosperity, order, harmony, equality. So you must live to your heart content, mean don't be a liar. Don't be a hypocrite. If you want to do something, do it. If you want to don't destroy yourself, because they also talk about overindulgence and things. But if you want to, in this modern times, if a person want to smoke a cigarette, and you really in your heart want to smoke a cigarette, but you're going to feel like a hypocrite because somebody say you smoking a hypocrite, you're not being true to yourself. Ma'at means be true to self. It was all about being true to your heart. If you want to love somebody, love somebody. If you have anger towards a family, a friend, or enemy, let that be. Whatever's in your heart, let it come forth, because the heart will be judged. And that was that concept that was pervaded through the African mind, you know. And a third thing I want to get on to right fast is that when you spoke about the resurrection. Now, it wasn't when you spoke of Amet, you showed the beast and you talk about spiritual annihilation. No, that's erroneous. That's erroneous. Our people taught the silical reality, meaning resurrection or reincarnation, not total damnation, not oblivion of the soul, because the soul can't be destroyed. Mm-hmm. So that's an erroneous thing when people think that when they see the beast and met at the scales, or it destroys the soul. No, that symbolizes in this reality, if you live on your lower nature, your lower three chakras, your desires, your wants, if you live off the lower nature of a sexual drive and perversion, and you just live a base lifestyle, those are the three things that destroy you in this reality. The judgment scene is about this reality, not when you die. People, they got this all mixed up and got our, especially when they teach this, they got people thinking from a Judeo-Christian mind that our people is looking like, oh, when you die. No, that's why all of this is set up, because this is the actual last stage. When we die, you wake up to the real reality. I'm gonna pause with that.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to pick up Brother Eve. Thank you for joining us, Brother Eve. Brother Eve, hit that share button, hit that like button, hit that, start that watch party, start on Facebook. There are a few things that you touched upon, Brother Israel, and one of them were, you didn't use this terminology, but something in that scene, that judgment scene, that's what some folks call them the 40 negative confessions, the 40 negative confessions. And that's something that you might want to pick up on that a little bit more. But something else that you mentioned that actually I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to make this note. Next week's program, the message, we're going to talk about something that you mentioned, Brother Israel, and that's the chakras. You use that term, use that word, and some folks may not know what you're talking about with that. So we're going to, that's next week's topic is the chakras. So I'm writing that down for next week, All right. But going back to the comments that you were making as far as the different realities and the knowledge that you have as far as when we look at those hieroglyphs and we interpret them, for number one, I know that even though I have a couple of years on me, that I'm a few years old, I wasn't here at the time that those hieroglyphics were being written on the pyramids. Some folks might say I am that old, but no, I'm not that old. So I wasn't. I was not around in that day to understand the popular understanding of that day as to what those symbols meant. And as we know, just dealing with modern times, that we can use the English language and we can write a word down, and that word has a certain meaning in the year, let's say in the year 1920, that word has a certain meaning. And then in the year 2020, the word has a different meaning. So someone reading something that was written in the 1920s, they may have a different understanding of what was actually meant when it was first written. And when I've done research on the Book of Coming Forth, the research that I've done, prominent in that research is this concept of the weighing of the heart and these negative confessions. And just a little bit more overview of what's being taught. Okay, what's being taught is that this papyrus, this scroll that was placed in the coffin, was supposed to be a scroll of magic spells. Now, I'm not saying this is exactly what it was or not. I'm just saying when you read on it, depending upon what perspective that you have on it, this is what's being written, that the scrolls contain magic spells, and the magic spells were used by the person when the person died. And the Brother Israel when the person left from one realm into another realm, into that duat, that in order to get to this other realm, this heaven, this field of reeds, in order to get there, they had to pass through this judgment. And in order to make it all the way through this journey, there were different obstacles. There were all kind of monsters and beasts and everything else. And in order to protect them as they went through that, they would have magic spells that they would have to say. And they would come to certain different gods in the underworld, and the god would be guarding yes, go ahead,
Can
brother.
I stop, bro?
Yeah, go right
Because
ahead.
it's like, I'm just so much crazy stuff when I hear that.
Right.
And that's popular belief. That's just like, come on, man. It's 2021. Now, I feel so adamant about this, first of all, because I want to share this with the people. I could speak on this. I'm 45 years of age. I have over 27 years of active research into our history, our culture, who we are as a people on planet Earth. I started going to a community bookstore here in New Orleans at the age of 15. Mama Jennifer and them could tell you this. So I'm not just some dude talking. You know, I have research, background, history on all this stuff. I'm 45. I started going to a community bookstore and was on St. Claude or Ursuline at the age of 15. So I ain't just nobody on here talking.
Right. But brothers, you know something I think would be very helpful to our viewers is let me lay out what's the popular was printed. Let me lay that out, and then if you can come back and be able to school our viewers and school us on exactly based upon your research. So let me just lay out the what's popularly taught. Okay,
It's a lot of stuff that's covering. You know, it's a lot of stuff that's, you know, it'll be jogging the mind. And I'm making points on, you know, the important things.
All right.
You know.
All right. Well, let me take just about maybe about 3 more minutes just to hit some of these things, and then you can come on back and share with us your research on it. So all right, as a person died, they would their soul would enter into duat, and there was a journey through the underworld. And on this journey, they would be confronted by all different kinds of demons and gods that would be guarding certain gates that the soul had to pass through. And in order, now this is what's being taught. In order to make it through those particular gates, you had to fool the gods. You had to trick them, and you had to use what's called spells. And the magic spells were written on this papyrus. And that papyrus was buried with you, so in case you forgot what that magic spell was, it was already written down there. So when this god confronted you, or this monster confronted you, you'd be able to whip out this magic spell and get past that. And as you journeyed and you made your way, then you finally came to the scale and this final God, and you're to determine whether or not you would enter into, as I say, that field of reeds, that heavenly place where you'd be reunited with, you know, everything, anything you ever lost, including parents, anything else like that, just a blissful place. But in order to make it through that final step, your heart had to be weighed. And there were these things that were called the 40 negative confessions. And it was things that, you know, some scholars now say that the 10 Commandments actually were derived from those 40 negative confessions. And when I say negative confessions, it was things that during my life, you know, I have not killed anyone. I have not committed adultery. I have not stolen anything. And after all of that, and then there was a final one. And I forgot the final one, but the final one was kind of like a get out of jail free card, that if I did do any of these things, then I'm sorry, or don't hold it against me, something like that. And based upon all of that, your heart being on that scale, and if your heart was so free of guilt, free of sin, free of everything else, if it was so free of that, then it would be lighter than a feather, and you could go on into heaven. So that's in a nutshell, was popularly thought. Now, Brother Israel, I'm gonna let you bring us home, Brother Israel. Brother Clarence, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Sister T, thank you for joining us. Sister Tiff, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Please hit that share button, that like button. And this will be on Facebook, and it'll be on our YouTube page later on, so you'll be able to share it with your friends. But Brother Israel, the floor is yours.
All right. Now, I'm going to touch on first what's called the negative confessions. Once again, that's a Eurocentric mind outlook on African thought. They're not negative confessions. They were actually called the declarations of innocence. First of all, that's why I say you got to be careful with all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there ain't no negative confessions. They are the declarations of innocence. Now, what is that? Oh, my battery going low. All right. All right. Now, what is the declaration of innocence? That was declaring that in your life, like I said, you have lived a myotic life, not meaning you were hypocritical in regards to how we understand hypocrisy. You was living to your heart content. If you want to be an artist, you was an artist. A fisherman, whatever your heart content was, you were doing that. It's just like now, people making music, people writing, people out here educating people. It's the same. The things we're doing now in society was done over 10,000 years ago. We ain't doing nothing too special outside of the technology we have. The thought process, the way we interact with humans, the way we talk is all the same. All right. So the declaration of innocence was declaring that a person had lived a life that was in accordance with Ma'at. Because the whole society of ancient Kemet was predicated on Ma'at. The whole Nile Valley structure was set up on Ma'at. Ma'at is balance, reciprocity, prosperity, order, harmony, equality. In a nutshell. So those were the declaration of innocence. Now I'm gonna move forward. There's more I could talk about that. The other thing was the hieroglyphics, the Medu Neder. The Medu Neder. Now people say Sumeria started language or writing. Me and a lot of people under the pretense that it started in the Nile Valley, Africa. For the simple fact, with the Medu Neder, you have animals, you have body parts, you have utensils, you have celestial, the sun, you have creation in this writing. You don't just have no sticks thrown together, some scribble scratch kindergarten stuff. This is an active living language because it used the whole reality around it to construct the language. Feet, hand, eyes, heads, toes, birds, hawks, you name it. It's a living language. That's why it's called the Medu Neder. So I could get into more of that. Now I'm gonna go to another thing. The scrolls of protections. They were scrolls of protections, actually. What are scrolls of protections and why did they need scrolls of protection? You mentioned monsters. You mentioned the underworld. You mentioned they had to trick the gods. The only gods that's being tricked right now is us. First of all, I won't put that out there. The only gods that's being tricked is the black man and black woman in America. That's the only gods that's being tricked. Now back to this. That underworld journey is all symbolic to what you do in this reality. The hardships you go through, the betrayals you go through, the letdowns you go through, these are considered the underworld elements. These are the living monsters. It wasn't just no monster on the other side with some just a monster. No, it wasn't none of that. The reality is the monster. The reality of the things in which you go through, the reality and the things that you put yourself through. This is the underworld. This is the journey through the underworld. Those spells, there's some called Hika. Hika right here. And I just had this print up. This is Hika right here. I don't know, let me see. It's fading.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that's a
that's the
little bit
magic.
better.
He is magic. He fading in and out. But the word Hika is not magic how we see magic. Magic how we know magic comes from the Eurocentric word mage. Hika, and how our ancestors use it, was creative utterance. Our creative utterance is the magic, not the magic that Eurocentrics do. See, that's why I say, when understanding this stuff, it's totally two different things. So Hika, which people call magic, is used to fight off two things. It's used to your creative utterance, your creative mind and utterance is used to ward off negative people in this reality, and is used to ward off negative forces in the cosmic reality. So that's what those scrolls.
Excuse me, brother. How you spelling that? In case any of our viewers want to do some research on that Hika.
Oh, the word Hika is spelled H-E-K-A.
All right.
H-E-K-A.
All right, brother.
And, so they were not. You had to, just like we're learning. You study the Bible. You study the Quran. You study the Torah. You study the Kabbalah. You study all these different books. Well, for us, you had to know. That's why the Gnostics kept the gnosis and the knowing alive. It wasn't nobody tricking. How you gonna trick a God? That's ridiculous.
That's a good question.
You know what I'm saying? So, you know, but it was about having a proper recital, having the proper things that you would do on earth, especially if you into those studyings. Now, if you're just a person who don't study scripture, who don't study literature, well, it might be a little difficult for you as you transcend. But for a person who studied literature and who studied scripture, that transition is going to be just that much easier because you're already getting familiar with so many spiritual concepts. It's those who don't get familiar with the spiritual concepts who are in trouble. So you had to know. That's all that was about. It wasn't about no, you got to trick a God. That's why I said that you know how Egyptology and this society write on our history is totally two different things. And I'm gonna stop right there.
All right, brother. Yeah, well, that's a whole lot, for us to chew on. And as you see, I asked how do you spell that word, spell that name, so that our viewers can do their own research. You know, and I invite and I encourage everyone to do your own research. No matter if you hear me say something, you hear Brother Israel say something, you hear anybody else say something. Do your own research. And if it's something that you find out that, yes, it's pretty much on base, then that's fine. If you find that there's something that was questionable that was said, let us know about it. You know, let us know about it. This space is a safe space. You're not going to be criticized, condemned for information that you bring here. We're not going to fight about who's right or who's wrong. This is a safe space. And if something can't stand the scrutiny, if it can't stand to be questioned, if it can't stand to have light shine on it, then you need to leave that alone. So I thank Brother Israel for the information that he brings. And as you heard him say, that this is not something that he just started, reading up on last week. That this is something that he's been doing the research. And I know he spoke about being out there with Sister Vera at the Community Book Center, and I've done quite a bit of research there myself in the past. But I'm going to come back and I'm gonna pick up on something. I'm gonna pick up on something that you said, Brother Israel. And when we are reading books, okay, when we are reading books, when we are listening to people share information with us, we are operating on this level. As Brother Israel spoke about these various levels of being, various levels of existence. Brother Israel spoke about uh, above and
The
below.
state of awake state.
And you might hear some folks talk about as above, so below. It's good to learn and gain knowledge on this level where we're gaining that knowledge through our senses of touch, see, hear, smell. It's good to gain knowledge on this level. But I am here to affirm that knowledge, not only can knowledge be gained, but knowledge is gained every day, all day long on that above level. On that above level. Right, brother? Right, Brother Israel?
Right, right. Right. I'm glad you mentioned. I'm glad you ended that with touch, hearing, sense, and sound. That's exactly the next level of that is what we call hika, what we call intuition, what we call spiritual clairvoyance, what we call what the last show was about.
Yeah, right. The powers.
You know, all of that. So yeah,
Right.
touch, sight, hearing, smell, sense, and the etheric perception, the last one is not taught. What they call it intuition is under our ancestral prospect is hika, and hika, which is written all over the scrolls. All of this is the creative utterance. So that's what this is about. Like this, the creative utterance is the magic, you know. So what our ancestors did with the book of coming forth by day, like I said, it wasn't no canonicalized book. It was various writings, and they all started on the walls, on the stone, before they put it on the papyrus. Those particular writings were on the stones first, because it wasn't for all the people. It was only for those who were in the temple, in the circle, those who were, you know, the masters and the mistresses. It wasn't just for the common people, you know. And then thousands of years later, it became something for the common people, the fishermen, the artists, the singer, whoever, you know, the judicial people and stuff. Well, they had it, but you know, so that's what this is about. The book of coming forth by day is all about the protecting yourself in this reality, and preparing to protect yourself in a transition, just like we're transitioning through our from youth to adult. We go through so many different things, good or bad. It's a similar reality that our ancestors is explaining to us with the Declaration of Innocence, with all the wisdom texts, with all the information that's available, we call spiritual information. Is to protect you as a being, as a god or a goddess. It's to protect you from other beings who become negative gods and goddesses, or become no good people or whatever. You know, society, officials, is this thing starts with on an individual level. You got to deal with these things as an individual. You got to fight your own demons and your own lower higher self individually. Then this stuff takes place in society, where you have the clashing of these two forces. You know, so the book of coming forth by day was definitely all about the enjoyment of going to the Elysian fields. How you say it, the Reeds fields, the Elysian fields. We got a street called Elysian Fields here in New Orleans. You know what I mean? And it was all about going to the Elysian fields. And in the Elysian field, guess what people are doing? If you study any afterlife, more information on Kemet people of the Nile Valley, you will find out they were going to live on and do some of the stuff they were doing here. Some of the people got married who ain't never was married here. Some of them had children who ain't never had children here. If you deem glorious to go to the west and live with Osai and to be judged to become a high God, well, from that information what I get, you go on to create whatever reality you want. So it's not that you go to heaven and you go sit on the right-hand side of God. That's only solar teachings. That's solar teachings. You go sit on the right-hand side of God. That's solar teachings. We talk about stellar teachings. Right. I'm gonna stop right there.
All right, Brother Israel, that's some dynamite information that you share, some great knowledge that you share. And one of the statements that you made about some of those teachings relating to the scrolls, that at one point that knowledge was hoarded, that knowledge was confined, that knowledge was limited to folks of a certain social status, whether or not it was the pharaoh or rich people or whatever, until at some point that it was indeed spread out. And the reason why that knowledge was guarded is because it's true. That knowledge indeed is power. Knowledge is power. And as you know, as at the beginning of every show, I identify that this program is produced by the Society of Knowledge. And that's not a coincidence. That name is not a coincidence. The Society of Knowledge. And as I close, as I do every week, I want to thank Brother Israel for joining us and sharing with us the knowledge that he has. And I hope that he will continue to join us and to share that knowledge. I want to thank all of our viewers on Facebook and remind you that you can go to our YouTube page, and this program, tonight's program, should be uploaded to the YouTube page, hopefully within the next day or two. But right now, you can go to our YouTube page and you can see previously recorded episodes of the message. And as I close out, as I said, that knowledge is power. Yes, knowledge is indeed power. And the greatest piece of knowledge that I have, is that God is Almighty. By no matter what name you call God, there is a being of which all of us are a part. And that being is indeed Almighty. And because that being is Almighty, that being can help you go through whatever it is that you have to go through, no matter whatever it is that you have to go through, and go through it with peace. And that's my prayer as I close. May God Almighty, this upcoming week, may God Almighty bless you and yours with peace. Peace, brother, peace.